Welcome to the Saving Humanity podcast. And this podcast is designed to tell stories, have stories that inspire people from inspiring people, from people that have a story to tell, and with the goal of enriching those that listen to it and not just inspiring and motivating, but also teaching. And the more personal, the more universal. And it's a Salt Lake City area based. Um, we're trying in our sphere of influence, we're trying to positively affect as many people as we can. So, welcome to the Saving Humanity podcast.
Beautiful. That was a beautiful introduction. All right. So, I've had the honor of getting to know Taylor over working alongside with him. And he is, without a doubt, one of the most interesting and inspiring people that I've gotten to know. And over our time serving and working with those with developmental disabilities, I've gotten to know a lot about Taylor's very inspiring story. And I've been honored to be a guest on his podcast to talk about that story. So here we are.
Here we are.
So
And
I've heard your story.
Yep.
And I've found it's been of great value to me. And I think we would be doing a disservice to people if we didn't share that story. And so I was like, I know you don't super like sharing your story because I know you've mentioned that you don't want people to think you're a victim, or I mean, would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, but we talked about it, and I'm like your story has been of great value to me, and it's inspired me, and I really do think that like people need to hear it, not to make people feel bad for you or anything, but I think it's to inspire people because you're not a victim. You're not just sitting around like upset about this. You're living life, you're killing it. And it's been awesome to see you like be who you say you are, you know.
Thank you, brother.
And to hear the stories that you tell, like it's insane. And obviously they're true. So well, let's get into it.
So a little bit about me, and some of you may know if you know me, but I'm not from Utah. I'm from Mobile, Alabama, and sort of born and raised, in the deep South. I'm so far south, you actually run out of water. You actually run out of land. You're on the water, I should say. So I'm not from Utah, and lived all over the country. Have a coaching background and things. I'm here in Utah, getting treated at the Huntsman Cancer Institute Center, I guess, for a very rare form of cancer, a cancer that's is treatable. It's not for everybody sometimes, and it certainly presents itself in different ways. And for me, it first presented itself about 8 years ago. I was working at the University of Wyoming, working in football, and couldn't lift my hands above my head. Long story short, the cancer ate away a vertebrae in my neck. I ended up going to the hospital for 50 days in Denver, University of Colorado Hospital, and I had to learn how to walk again, hold a fork again, go to the bathroom again, just all the things that are fun. And so that was, for me up to that point, I was a guy that I didn't even go to the doctor. And I stayed away from the doctor. And I probably had been to the doctor one time in 5 years previous to that. And so basically, that was the first real thing. And since then, I've had the cancer, get at my hip a little bit. I've had a hip replacement. Had a hip replacement at 32. I've had some success. I've had the cancer kind of go to a place where it's not threatening my life, and then it comes back again. And this past fall, I was in the hospital for a week at the Huntsman Cancer Institute because my white blood cell count was close to 300,000. But I think as I've faced more mortality, it's been freeing in a way, because it gives me a chance to really know that, like, number one, this life is precious, and number two, it's time goes by so quick, but in general, it gives me a sense of purpose to live by, of how do I want to go out, if I go out. And it's not a matter of if, it's when, for all of us. And so, I guess my mindset is, I want to enrich those that I interact with, and I'm not perfect, and that, just it always on my mind, try to enrich those and positively affect those that I interact with, and knowing that sort of the love and energy that I create lives on long after I do. So, as I've been on my own journey in life, and not just the cancer thing, but also different careers. I was a football coach for a long time in the football business, got in the football business, and really sort of, not just coach, but sort of was a person that was in the business, and sort of, you know, was pretty well known in my little niche of the world of football, which is offensive line, and so forth. And, um, my sort of dance with death has changed even how I want to spend my time. I football I love, and it's a beautiful game, and I know there's a lot of people that love it, and I get asked questions about it all the time. And people, if they find out what I did, they ask me questions. I want to talk about it, but and this because you spent thousands, yeah, certainly hundreds of hours with me. I love the game, but it's not something that I really wanted to spend the rest of my life doing. And so, for me, the jobs I do now, and I do have, as you know, like four different jobs, but I teach school, I work with kids, I work with folks with special needs, and I work with teenagers who have basically are suicidal to an extent, and I've done other things, but those are the main things I do kind of in the umbrella of how I live my life, and I like working, and I know that the one thing I can control, and I guess this podcast is kind of symbolic of that, or embodies this, is that I can enrich those I interact with. I can do no harm, and I can be a beacon of good energy for those that I'm around, and in my little sphere of influence, I can positively affect those, and that's what that's why I wanted you on here. Before anybody, because I'm inspired by you, and I know it's always awkward when you talk to somebody in front of themselves, but you motivate me too, brother. You're an awesome person. The way you handle people, the way you treat me, just watching you, and this is, and I feel like age doesn't matter, but as I look at you and your age, I'm just like, oh my God, this guy's destined for greatness, and you already have helped a lot of people, and if it there's nothing more that you have to do to prove anything, but just in general, though, I see it, and so I wanted to get you on the podcast, the production of the video and the audio, because you're somebody that like inspires me, that I know that like how you are, how you live, what you're about can help other people. When I see you, man, you look like you have it so together. You're always calm, cool, and um, I know that's not necessarily how you always feel, or how you always were. So I wanted to talk with you too about the things that you're doing now and the things that have helped you in the past. Because I think you're somebody that people do look up to, and you're gonna be successful in life, financially and in other ways with the stuff that you're doing, but not just that. It's really who you are as a person, and the things that have helped you become the person that you are. So,
Yeah. I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah.
I do. Um, let's jump into real quick. Let's just go for the throw.
Yeah.
Let's jump into you being diagnosed. Like,
Yeah.
what was that like? How old were you?
I just turned 28. I was just turned 28 years old for about a month, and I kept having a pain in my neck, and I was like, it's a pinched nerve. It's a pinched nerve, and I'm working at the University of Wyoming, and we can't miss time. We're coaches. We're trying to go to win a championship.
Yeah.
So, and I was working off the field. I wasn't coaching on the field, but it's still a pretty big responsibility that I was felt like I had to do. So, kept getting worse. I was going to the chiropractor. I was getting pins in the back of my neck. I was doing everything. I was taking all kinds of supplements. And
this was before you knew?
Before I knew. I hadn't been a doctor in 5 years.
Wow.
So basically, I kept pushing through. I kept saying, man, I can do this. I actually went to go see the chiropractor, and he cracked my neck. And I remember just horrible pain that just shot through my body. Later
Yeah.
on, I found out that almost killed me, or
Oh my
could
gosh.
have killed me because I didn't have a C4 vertebrae, so my spine was
Oh
barely
my
hanging on. So
gosh, dude.
so but I was willing to try anything, and in fact, it hurt so much that I was just like crying. I had tears coming down my face as I lay on the thing, and I was like, oh, I'm pushing my comfort
Wow.
zone because even then I was like, sometimes the only way out is through, So here I am, and eventually it got so bad I couldn't like draw on the board. So like you're supposed to like write things down on a whiteboard for football.
Mhm.
Couldn't even do it. Like I couldn't even write. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to the doctor. Got an MRI. Doctor comes out and he says, I think I found your problem.
Mhm.
And I said, great. I'm thinking he's gonna be like, oh, we gotta put you in a neck brace for a couple of weeks. You don't have a C4 vertebrae. And I was like, okay.
It was just
And
completely gone.
completely gone. Nothing there.
What the heck, dude?
Nothing there. So I thought,
That's so
well,
crazy.
what happened? I said, what do you think it is? And he's like, well, you're either born without one, or or, and the more likely is you have some sort of cancer that's maybe eating it away.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I kind of knew I was kind of born with one just because I kind of felt like the odds were in my favor, but I didn't really know what was going to happen. And I immediately went from that conversation to being transported in an ambulance a couple hours south to Denver.
Yeah.
And then from there, I remember talking to someone in the emergency room operating room. So the pre op for the emergency room.
Yeah.
And I was in Denver. I woke up, which I didn't know. I woke up a week later and, was asked where I was, where am I? And I could see I was at the University of Colorado. So I assumed Boulder. I said, Boulder? And they said, no, you're in Aurora. And then it became obvious moments later that I couldn't really move. So I was just in a state of shock. I didn't, and my parents were there. My parents were in the room. So it was a interesting experience, just that alone. Had to
So
end up
why were you unconscious?
because I had 3 surgeries. So I was just, they were putting me under, and this is what
You
happened.
woke up a week later?
A week later, and
That's
this
crazy.
and this is what happened. They did emergency surgery to stabilize my spine. Basically,
Yeah.
go in through the front and try to put something in there to hold the neck up to stop it from collapsing on the spinal cord because you can eventually stop breathing and just die. So
Oh my gosh.
what they didn't know was that the blood doesn't clot properly. So when they had surgery on me, my platelets and my blood was bad basically, and so it was there was a problem. It was getting bigger. It was almost like suffocating me because it wasn't healing, and they realized that post surgery. So they realized that post surgery they took blood and realized that hey, this is an interesting situation. So they had to go in there 3 times and go back in there. They kept putting me under. They kept going to surgery. They kept putting me under. Kept going to surgery. So I was would it be inoculated or whatever the term would be. In fact, I was actually on a breathing machine. So I was on a breathing machine. I have a picture somewhere of myself on a breathing machine, and I you know woke up about 30 pounds lighter, could not move, could not lift my hands, still above my head, and that sort of started the process for me to get back to normal.
Mhm.
And it was a road, man. It was a road. A lot of embarrassment, a lot of things I never thought I'd have to do. Um, and it taught me just like how great people are, really, because like the CNAs, the nurses, the stuff they had to do for me, like I didn't even know people did stuff like that. So that was like where I was like, oh my god, like I've been living like this superficial life, and I don't mean like everybody says that, but like being in football, like my concern was like some football play as opposed to like the thing that we probably find of value, which is being of service to our fellow man in some way, and that sort of got the a lot more to it than that, but just that process was it started there for me to sort of realize that wow, I'm a very flawed individual, and I can tell you a couple more stories.
Yeah, go for it. Go
um,
for it.
the the defining moment that I still think about, and I'll never forget. This will be on my deathbed. They came back and they said, once I was somewhat conscious, they said, "Hey, we think you have two cancers. We think you have a blood cancer, and then two forms, basically. And um, so we know you have one. We think you have another one. We're gonna have to do a PET scan to sort of see what's going on. Why are these things eating your neck away, and so forth." So I go to so they wheel me from my room to a different place to get a PET scan. When you get a PET scan, they put this like dye inside your arm,
Mm.
and so they can see it light up
Yeah.
because the cancer it'll light up on the cancer. So I remember it was like there was like a, and this is kind of fuzzy, but there's basically like there was someone doing the PET scan. I was outside the PET scan, so I was in like a waiting area, and I remember waiting for this PET scan to find out I had two cancers, and or to be to what they thought was going to be two cancers, and I remember just crying. So I remember tears rolling down my face.
Yeah.
And the thing was is that because they put the PET scan stuff in there, the stuff started flowing out of my eyes. So it just burned. It just made it worse. So here I'm waiting. I can't move. I'm still like paralyzed. I'm wearing a neck brace. Like I'm waiting to get a PET scan. I can't move and I'm crying. And now I've got this dye just coming out of my eyes
The
and it's
dye was
burning.
coming out of your eyes.
Yeah, the dye was coming out of my eyes because it
That's
goes in your
insane.
body and then it was coming out. So
Yeah.
um I just felt dumb for all the times I was petty, all the times I didn't, live up to my own integrity and do the things I knew I could do. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel angry. I just felt like I'm gonna die here. Because even at my state coming out of consciousness, I knew if you have two different cancers, those aren't good odds.
Yeah.
So I just felt like, man, I've wasted a lot of my life, and man, I did the PET scan. I actually only had one cancer, which was treatable, and um, I still have it. I'm dealing with it. 25 years ago, there was no cure for this cancer, and now there is, thanks to like some TKIs, which are target kinase inhibitors. They target the mutation. There's some bad effects of that too. They can overkill.
You've told me this cancer
Mhm.
used to be like a death sentence.
Death sentence, 3 to 5 years at most. People could live with it because it starts off like in a chronic phase, kind of slow developing, and then it
And
just
you've
heats
had it
up.
for how long?
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah, close to 8 years, 7.5 years. So, and it's been not all bad. Like it's gone down below. It can be controlled with oral chemotherapy, but sometimes it's not. And I'm kind of going back on that track now. I'm kind of back on the road of maybe the medicine isn't working. Do we have to do a different, tactic? Um, just in general, though, I've kind of always in the back of my mind, I was told one of the doctors that I would have to have a bone marrow transplant in 7 years, which a bone marrow transplant is not what you want to hear because it's like a 40% chance of survival after a year because there's a thing called graft versus host disease, which is where your new bone marrow attacks your body or your body attacks your new bone marrow. So those things are still on my mind and things, but really there's been a lot of physical pain with this, the hip, eating my hip away, my neck, but all those things though are good because it made me a more patient, resilient individual. It made me just better. I was not proud of myself, and we can talk about you, but I look at you, and this is true, and I think to myself, how can this guy be the way he is at his age? Like just so far advanced of where I thought I was. And I was smart. And I had good qualities, and I was good at developing relationships as far as the guys maybe I work with or coached and things of that nature. But definitely didn't have it to the degree you do. And I'm much more proud of the person I am now, because I'm a more humble and just a person who is more in touch with others and sort of how my role in society is, which is really to enrich those I interact with. And you know this, that like here with some of the jobs we've had, you deal with some folks who can be challenging. And even then, I do my best, and I'm not perfect. I definitely don't handle everything. But I even now, like I wish for it to do better. Number one, but also know that like everyone is me just in a different life form, and try to have unconditional love for them, knowing they're doing the best they can. And even if they wish ill on you and, all those kind of things, you just know like, hey, it's okay. And I love that person unconditionally. So that's sort of my story and my background. And along the way, work a lot and just want to improve myself. So the one good thing about the cancer is it makes you fearless. It makes you, you really can lose your ego pretty quickly when number one, you're like can't even use the bathroom by yourself, but also you lose it when you know the time is ticking. You can hear the clock ticking. And that sounds mortifying. And I'm not saying I'm dying, but in general, though, you hear the clock ticking and you're like, hey, let's go do this right now. I'm more willing to step out and do things than I ever was before because, you kind of think you're hiding, you're protecting something, or you're holding back, you got something to lose. And you realize, like, hey, it's time to play ball. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, dude, I've learned a lot from you.
Well, thank you,
And
brother.
just your perspective on life is awesome. And just, man, I couldn't imagine going
Yeah.
through that. That's just insane. So this whole, you could say spiritual journey started
Yeah.
for you after the diagnosis and just,
I think so. I'm
Yeah.
fortunate too because I had just gotten into self development about 7 or 8 months before all this.
Mhm.
So like I didn't know who Tony Robbins was to save my life. I would make fun of stuff like that even when I was your age. I don't know if I'd make fun, but I'd be like, I'd be skeptic. I'd be like, why are they acting like this? And there's a guy named Owen Cook, and he's kind of controversial, but he teaches people how to socialize. He teaches people how to network with people. Teaches people how to get to know people that are of value, or whether it be for social or for business. And I started watching some of his stuff and listening to him, and he was kind of turning me on to Tony Robbins. That's how I found out about Tim Ferriss, and just the whole thing with like slowly getting me where I needed to be. It was like the universe lined up, and I was becoming more process oriented. Like I was learning to trust the process and not be so reactive, I guess you'd say. And that helped me a lot during that because I kept hearing the voice of a guy named Owen Cook, who, if you Google Owen Cook, he's still out there. He's still awesome. I still watch his videos, and he's helped a lot of people. So I'm very lucky that I even got into self development when I did because it gave me something to latch onto, and it gave me something to sort of keep in mind. And I mean, I was practicing my social skills wearing a neck brace and like 130 pounds, now like 180 pounds. And so I learned that you can almost do anything if you just are willing to just try and make a fool out of yourself, but just never stop. Never stop. So that's it. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's awesome. So what about your time with coaching football?
Yeah.
Did you do that still after your diagnosis, or did you stop doing that around that time?
Yeah, I got in the football business, so I couldn't coach. So I was too bad off. I couldn't physically coach, and so when the jobs kind of came open, I couldn't take those. But there's a coach. He was with the Cincinnati Bengals named Paul Alexander, and I'd met Paul at the Senior Bowl a few years before this, and I went up to watch him do a mini camp in 2013, and I went up to the Cool Clinic, which is a network kind of thing, networking event, and a sort of a learning experience for coaches. And then I had known Paul, so I got with Paul and checked out his mini camp. And I had a little bit of a relationship with Paul, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I told my dad, I said, "Look, I know Paul Alexander. My dad was in my hometown of Mobile, which is just a coincidence that the Senior Bowl is hosted in Mobile every year." So my dad went down to the Senior Bowl. I'm in Denver. I can't come home due to insurance purposes, so I'm like having to stay up there and get treated. And I'm living in an apartment across from the hospital. I don't even have my car. Like my car's been like driven home because I can't drive because I got like a neck. Like I'm walking around like this. So my dad told Paul. He said, "Look," he said, "could you just call Taylor and tell him that everything's going to be good, that like that you believe in him. You don't have to do anything, but he's just up there. He's kind of there. And this was in January, and I was getting treated in November, December. I got out of the hospital into December. So now I'm in this apartment. I don't even know if I'm going to have surgery again on my neck, much less how the cancer's going. I'm like, so he says, well, how about I can do better than that. Would he, when he gets done with this, like a job? And I was like, my dad told me, and I said, well, what's the job? He's like, well, there's a company called Pro Football Focus, which is actually pretty famous. And if you Google my name, there's some stuff from Pro Football Focus. But
Mhm.
Chris Collinsworth, who's does the play-by-play for Sunday Night Football, he owns the company. So
Mhm.
Paul introduced me to Neil Hornsby, who started the company, and Paul was based out of England. He was a guy who just loved football, started grading players, kind of revolutionized football. There's not a there's no NFL team who doesn't use the service. It's used by almost all the college teams. It's used by agents. It's really changed the game of football. It's changed how players are evaluated, because for years it was the eyeball test, and Neil gave basically a tangible way to evaluate talent. He had a point system, and he graded all the players, and so having an experienced offensive line, it was kind of a newer company. It wasn't necessarily a startup, but it was basically they were expanding like a startup. They basically were becoming a startup in some of the new things that they were doing, and so
Mhm.
they hired me to help with the offensive line, and I did that for 3 years, and then I had a little company of my own too that I started. In between that, I would coach and help teams, and so I kind of made a little bit of a name for myself in football with this very niche thing called the outside zone play. So it's sort of a nuanced thing, but ended up doing some cool things. Did an internship with the Washington Redskins. Did some work with my friend Alex, who's actually now the offense coordinator at Florida State. Did some work with him at Charlotte, um, and just was continuing to be in football involved. So got back into football for 3.5 years, and then in 2019, I really just was about wore out with it. I realized that I wanted more. Kind of the whole, I think we learn lessons hard. Like I kept having to learn the hard way of like, man, like what am I doing? I'm not happy. Even though I should have probably, when I was in the hospital, taken that as a cue to get out of football.
Mhm.
It took me like 4 years later. So 4 years later, I finally realized I didn't want to be in football anymore, and I started doing, working with people and getting back into teaching and doing jobs that I think I'm better at, and I find more enjoyable. Um, I just love people. So, and I feel like I have a good, ability to sort of be grounded with people. And
How'd you get into teaching?
well, I want to be a coach, so I knew I wanted to be a coach, and the easiest way to do that was to be a teacher. Um, my dad was teacher and coach, and so um, I, you know, I guess I sort of followed in my dad's footsteps, so to speak. My dad kind of, I wanted to be a college football or an NFL coach, but I had to do something to get a degree because you have to start somewhere.
Right.
So I got a degree in teaching. I never really, I kind of didn't want to use it. I wanted to go straight to college coaching, which I ultimately did get into college coaching. Um, but I first went to high school. So I just wanted to be a coach really badly. I love football, at that time of my life. And as a boy, I was the boy laying on the ground. My dad was watching film, and I'd sit there and watch it with him. So
Yeah.
kind of family business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you are one of the most relentless, but at the same time, kind people I've ever met. I want to
you.
know, or I know some,
Yeah.
but I want you to talk about sort of more of your philosophy on life. Like your attitude is insane, dude. Like the most insane thing could happen at work.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're doing the best they can.
Yeah.
You're just
Yeah.
like so stoic, and you're just like, we're people just like they are, and they're doing the best they can, and you're just like, it's very grounding, and it's very like
Well, thank you.
calming in
Yeah.
like chaotic situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd imagine that came from the diagnosis and just shifting your perspective so hard on like your mortality and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah. This is true. I mean, I am ready to die at any point.
Because it's unlike most people I've
Yeah.
met.
Yeah.
Fast
No.
food. I
Well,
don't
thank
know
you.
if there's anyone else to compare it to. So.
Well, thank you. And so I am ready to die at any point. And I the situations that we're not going to talk about, but in that situation, which was unique, one thing I try to do is just like try to just like tell myself like this is the next thing I'm looking through. Like it's
Yeah.
not good or bad. It's just the next experience. So, and I really do believe we're all doing the best we can. And you know, I want to like it pains me when people are suffering, and suffering doesn't just mean sad and crying, but like
Yep.
what we call low vibration behavior, which is like doing something that hurts themselves or hurt others. And so when I see it, my heart does break for that person because I know that's a tough spot to be in. But as far as like the mental mindset, it really is just like this is the next sort of version that I'm experiencing. So it's neutral, I guess you'd say, where it's like, oh, this is interesting. This is the next thing. Even if somebody's like trying to punch me in the face or
Mhm.
whatever they're trying to do, it's like, oh, this is the next thing.
Yeah.
And I think too, like our brains have to develop and stuff. And I think age helped me with that, but also just like, you know, you know, you know, you know. The other thing is like, what kind of person do we want to be? Do we want to be the person who's a champion down in our bones, and that all the time you're a champion, or no, you want to be the champion that things go your way, you're the champion. And
Yeah.
they talk about character all the time, and like character is defined by how you treat people who can't do anything for you. And I believe that. It's like, who do you want to be,
Mhm.
when you're going through something? And I'm not perfect or anything, and I definitely am open to improving a lot, and I need it a lot. But I think that helps me keep that, because people have told me that, and I really do believe that, like, hey, this is the next iteration of which I'm viewing life through, and so let's not judge it. It's just the next thing. And the other thing is, we can talk about this, is and Owen Cook, the individual that if you read about him, he kind of teaches people how to develop their social skills. Is I'm big on exposing myself to voluntary discomfort in like the weirdest ways,
Yeah.
like way different than probably anybody else would or should. But
I mean,
basically,
things that I hear about, and I'm like, oh, dude, that's not in me. Like, I mean, I bet I could learn how to do it, but I'm like, just the idea of that makes me uncomfortable.
you could, and
Yeah.
and those things help. It gives you a sense of like calmness in the fight. It's like people like meditate and stuff, but you can't just meditate. Like you gotta test yourself. You got to go in the fire. So it's like, put yourself in the fire, see how you react. Put yourself
Well, it
in the
seems
fire.
like you see the most chaotic situations as like opportunities to level up. Like it'll be the craziest day. Like chaos will be happening, and like something happens with staff, something happens with a client or whatever, and you'll just look at me and you'll be like, "You're in the arena right now. Like we're in the arena.
Yeah.
Like this is good. Like this is
That's
we're
right.
building ourselves right now. We're becoming
building
better versions of
2.0,
ourselves.
2.0. We're becoming 2.0. And
yeah,
and,
you like you without fail, you always like throw something in there, and I'm like, you're right, and it just like totally shifts my perspective. Whereas normally I would just be caught up in the chaos, and your perspective has just allowed me to just like step out of it and be like, this is something I'm going to talk about one day. Like this is awesome. This is the arena.
The arena. You have to play ball, That's the only way. And you do too. You do too. To be fair, you do too. And it's fun. And when I'm in my higher state, that's where I'm operating,
Yeah.
And yeah. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you asking those things about me. Now, and you can feel free to talk more. I just that's amazing.
No, man, this one's about you.
Okay.
This one's about you.
All right.
We'll talk about other people plenty.
Okay. You're good at this, by the way. You're really good. Really good at
I've
this.
never done this before. So
You're awesome.
This is cool. This is fun.
You're good at this, man.
No, well, it's just I've learned a lot from you, man, and you've added a lot of value to my life. I feel like every shift that we've worked together, all the time we've spent with each other, whenever we walk away, it's like I learned something from that guy, and I've heard you vocalize the same thing.
Same way. So I told my dad, I was like, told my dad earlier. I'm like, I'm shooting a podcast with the guy I work with, and I was like, but I and he's asked, he's like, "And this is the guy you work with normally, the guy that you like." 'Cause my dad knows a little bit. I talk to him all the time,
Yeah.
so I was like, yeah. I said it makes it feel like it's not. I don't mind being here. Like I don't like dread it. I'm like, oh, this is terrible,
Yeah.
And let me tell you something too. Like, you do this a lot more than I do. But like, man, it's so good to get around people like motivate you and inspire you and that you want to be like. They always say you like people that are like you, or you like people that you want to be like. And I need to do more because in this field, and just in the fields of life, I mean, you meet a variety of people, and everyone's doing the best they can, and wherever they are on their journey, that's a beautiful thing.
Hmm.
No judgment at all. And I'm certainly a work in progress, but um, it's so rare to find somebody who's like locked in, trying to improve, has like a bigger view of like why they're here, what they're trying to do. Some stuff you've done in the past, like that I didn't even know about, that I learned about, and I'm just like, man, that's so different. So like, man, yeah, it's nice to be around people who motivate you, and I'm kind of an all or nothing kind of guy, and I could definitely see myself like getting around better quality people and being like, this is not draining. Like I'm not like draining when I'm being disciplined. I'm not draining when I'm being tough. I'm energized because the people around me are energized, and are the same way, and it's making me want to do it even more. It's making me want to be like this. Like this is who I am. This is my identity. And I
Hmm.
think sometimes I work so much, and I don't always take time to like go get around that, and I kind of
Hmm.
wish I did.
Yep.
I'm kind of winging it on my own, which is
Hmm.
cool. Um, it is so different though when you're around a different caliber of people, So
Have you always been really good at talking to people, or is that something that you had to
well,
develop?
thank you, brother. So my dad's really good at I'm from the South in Mobile,
Hmm.
Alabama.
Yep.
So we talk to everybody down there. We if somebody driving by us, we wave at them, and we acknowledge their presence. If I'm within 10 feet of somebody, I'm just going to say hey to them. That's just how I grew up.
Yep.
The talking to people I do like and I do enjoy since I was young.
Because like the maintenance guy came in here the
Yeah,
other day, and you two were friends in like
yeah,
2 minutes. I could tell this guy was like, this guy's awesome. Like,
yeah. Well,
I
thank
love
you.
talking to this guy.
You
And
know,
you just
yeah,
you got people skills that I need to develop. I mean, I wish I could
yeah,
have that. Yeah.
and you can, and it is developable. You can develop it, developable. It is because you just have to. So what I started doing
Yeah.
was I would go, and if I saw someone I was interested in talking to, just go talk to them.
Mhm.
And I
How
started
do
to
you
learn.
approach people? Like
So
that's so hard for
yeah,
most people.
yeah. I there's something I can find I like about everybody, or I can find something interesting about everybody.
Yeah.
So what I always know I can do is I can give an authentic compliment about not a person's looks or their, you know, if someone's a successful business guy, I'm not gonna be like, hey, you make a lot of money, but like say an authentic compliment about something that they've had to work for or earned or they thought about doing, and then also make an observation about what they're doing. So
Mhm.
it's a great way to kind of just do that. You can kind of give them a sample of your personality, and um, you can say something nice about them,
Mhm.
and just have a sense of curiosity. And I love meeting people. I love talking to people. I love interacting to people. There's different. It's easy when you're just passing by or just talking to someone, but also when you really want to get to know somebody and the environment's a little different, or if it's a networking event, like for me in coaching, I'd go to these networking events like the Senior Bowl,
Yeah.
and I would have to go talk to folks that I, in my career would be very beneficial for them to know me and me to know them. And, you know, I would, I would always say, I mean, I would go with the trying to offer value first and kind of having an understanding of what they're thinking about, and then just be willing to do it. Just be willing to do it, and then eventually you do it so much, and you know this because you do stuff like this, but your brain settles down. You're not even thinking about it. You're just rolling. I'm sure when you're like that when you talk to one person or talk to two people, and then your brain's like, oh, this is easy, and you can just talk to everybody,
Right.
and it's kind of like a flow state that you get into, and it's cool.
Well, I think people would be shocked how easy it actually is to talk to people because most people don't do it. And I've been trying to work on it a little myself. And it is surprising, like how, number one, how shocked people are when you actually approach them, because most people don't. Even like, for guys approaching girls out there, like most of them are shocked when you approach them because most guys aren't doing that.
Right.
But just people in general, I mean, I do think people would be shocked like how easy it actually is if you can just get in the groove of doing it. Because people don't expect it, and your brain's telling you the worst case scenario with what's going to happen. They're like, oh, they're going to tell me to F off or whatever. But
all the time,
chances are that's not going to happen.
No, chances are, and when it does, what I've helped, what has helped me, and this is so ridiculous, but I always say 0 to 10, how awesome was that? And I'm like 10, and who else would have the balls to do that? And I'm like nobody. And like so like if someone is unrealistically mean to me or clearly having a bad day, I'm just like 0 out of 10. How awesome was that? 10. I usually also laugh and smile, so I try to associate even like what could be deemed as like bad memories as like good, where it's like this is fun, So I just big smile. 0 to 10. How awesome was that? 10. Who else would have the balls to do that? Nobody. Yeah. And I just kind of smile like I'm snickering, like, this is a playground. And not like I'm smarter than anybody or something, but like kind of in my brain, I'm like, heh, Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah. But yeah, 99% of the time, nothing bad happens.
Yeah.
If you do it enough, somebody's not going to always be kind. When they are, 0 out of 10. How awesome was this? And and the other thing is, I just generally love people. Like I love talking to people. I love
That's the thing I want to talk to you about too. Is it's like most people are so focused on themselves, and you're really big. You and I have talked about just wanting to genuinely add value to the other person. Like that's huge.
Even in an interaction, just if it's just a positive smile or an energy that's transferred, or if it's knowledge or something like that, and I really do believe people are an extension of me in a different life form, and that's not like in a weird way, like some religious thing. It just really is like they're an extension of me, and
we're a lot more alike. We think.
Yeah, we're a lot more alike, and I want to enrich that person, and I've told you this, but like the energy and love you put forward lives on long after you do, and you'd be surprised, like the positive effect that you have on somebody, it can go a lot further than you think. Like the stuff that like you say, you might tell it to the right person, they'll tell it to someone, and then they might tell it to somebody like you would be shocked, like the president of the United States or something. You would literally be shocked, like how far it goes. So it's like it's a lot more under our control than we think it is, as far as creating our own reality. And it starts with just within our sphere of influence, trying to be a beacon of energy and positively affect those around us. And
what you say and do does matter. It does affect people.
Yeah,
100%. No matter who you are.
100%. Yeah.
1000%. Yeah. What was I going to say? Lost my train of thought. I think adding value can apply to every aspect of your life. Like even if you're in a relationship, I think a lot of people, they're so focused on themselves, they're not thinking about the other person. But like, what would happen if you actually thought about the other person and where they're coming from and how you're coming off and what kind of value you're actually adding to the other person? Like, I think even in relationships, people get so caught up with their own wants and needs that it's like when you guys get in an argument or whatever happens, do you actually take the time to go, how's this person feeling?
Right. Yeah.
Like when you get in an argument and you guys start yelling at each other, it's like that probably wouldn't even start if you would have just considered where the other person is coming from. And it's like you can argue how they're feeling all day, but what if you actually sat down and really thought about why they're feeling the way they're feeling and actually validate their feelings and then have a conversation about it, and you're actually thinking about the other person. I mean, I've really tried to implement that just in my relationship, and it saves so much time and energy because the other person actually feels understood and can tell. Like people can tell when you're thinking about them.
Right.
It's like you say when you're talking about like approaching women, it's like if you can't do that to everyone, then they can tell.
Yeah.
They know that you're just trying to take.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have experience with someone that we knew who maybe doesn't always do that, and doesn't think about the other people.
You don't want to be a taker,
and it ends up terrible.
And people can sniff it out,
and people sniff it out. Yeah. So exactly. So
not just women, but just people.
People.
They know when you're
Yeah.
trying to be salesy, or
Yeah.
you're just trying to take from them.
Yep.
You don't genuinely care
Yeah.
about them.
Yeah. 100%. And
It's so many.
yeah.
There's so many facets of life that can be applied to
and
every
you,
interaction you have.
and you know this because you are into this kind of stuff, but like
Yeah.
law of energy transfer is 100% real.
Yeah.
Science shows that people can take on the emotions of others, so people feel what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So if you come in a way that you're like, hey, I've said it's like being the sun. It's like I'm the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Here I am. I'm the sun. And so you're just giving the energy. You're
Yeah.
not at the you're at the cause, not the effect. You're not looking for the savior or the sun. You are the sun. And
Yeah.
when you talked about like thinking about other people, like this is so true, especially like if it's a situation with like someone whose opinion you're not concerned of, or like if you're having a great day and someone does something to you, you're not even thinking about it. You're not reacting, much less upset about it. You're just like, nah, and like if, and this is not always easy, but like if you have that kind of like that big picture mentality, and you're like, is this even that big of a deal? This person's probably upset. They're probably sad. They probably think this and this. They're probably doing the best they can anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have a little more compassion and empathy where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And like our higher selves know that. Like I know I'm going down the bad if I'm feeling it, like I'm feeling like an anger or resentment towards somebody, because it's like, dude, this is me. This is saying more about me than it is them. And it's so hard. It's so hard.
Mm-hmm.
But it is true though,
Yeah.
it is true.
Responding with love and care for the other person is always the best move.
Yeah.
Even if they don't feel the same way about you.
Right.
Even if they're self-centered
Right.
and they're thinking about themselves. Like, what would happen if someone got mad at you and was screaming at you and they lost their temper with you and you just responded with love and patience and care for them and understanding? What typically happens in those situations?
It would defuse
people usually go, I'm sorry, I lost my temper.
Yeah.
Like you can't lose with that kind of response. And I'm not saying like if someone attacks you on the street, don't defend yourself. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But just responding with love every time, that's how you win the game.
I'm thinking about just situations even we've been in, like it's the ego that always gets us, because it's like trying to rationalize and explain things away and explain to the other person why they're wrong.
Yeah.
It's just dumb. It's just dumb.
Yeah.
It doesn't do any. It makes us feel good for like 10 seconds, and then it's like, that was dumb. Like it's just, and it's just a cycle of like you just are going more and more down the demonic loop of trying to rationalize your way into how the world is not treating you fairly, or someone should understand how you're doing and how much you do, and how unfair this given situation is. And by the way, some situations are completely unfair. It's not like. At the same time, though, to give it that much of your reaction and control over you is counterproductive. So.
Yeah.
And yes, a lot of situations wouldn't even get to a problem if we could, basically just know that like it's our ego trying to rationalize things and make the person believe us. It's that little, it's that small, it's the lower self looking for gratification instead of who we really are meant to be.
100%. And there's so many like reasons why people react that way. And we could like dive deep into this, but there's so many things that have happened in people's past, like certain traumas that they've have. And that's why a lot of the time people respond like that, where they just get angry and upset. A lot of it is like just to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid of getting hurt. And there's so much scarcity in responding with love because they're being vulnerable. And they think that this is going to hurt me. I'm going to get shut down by this person and I'm going to get my feelings hurt. And somewhere along the line, they realize that responding with that love wasn't safe.
Right.
And so instead, I'm going to respond with anger to protect myself.
Right.
Like we go down the rabbit hole of that, but it's so true.
That's so
but
true.
Circling background.
Yeah.
To your situation with your diagnosis, how does it affect your life now?
Like well, and I've mentioned it, but you really just have a sense of like nothing holding you back. You're just like, hey, I'm here to play. Yeah. And I'm going to enjoy the moment, be as present as possible with everyone.
Yeah.
What
about like physically too?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Medications and you don't have to go into a bunch of detail, but like,
absolutely.
I don't know. Like people hear cancer, they hear the C word and they get freaked out and they think that, oh, you get that, you're going to die next week.
Right.
But
Yeah.
obviously nowadays, especially, that is not the
Yeah.
case.
No, it's not the case.
People are
And
curious.
every day it gets better and better. And I think people will be shocked if they haven't had, to do it, that not all chemotherapy is created the same.
Yeah.
So it has different effects.
Yeah.
Mine does weaken the bones in my body and cause problems. There is a fatigue with the chemotherapy I take. There is a mental cloudiness. There is problems with the cancer. My spleen right now is extremely swollen. I went to the doctor a few weeks ago and they could hear it. Like they were tapping on it. They could hear my spleen. So there are some negatives to it. I think I'm lucky. I'm lucky in a lot of regards. Number one, I stay on top of my health, the best I can. Number two, I have a chronic disease that can accelerate and get out of control. But it's different. It's not a tumor, like a physical tumor. It's a blood cancer. It's a blood disorder. So the mutation is happening in the bone marrow, and then maybe my cells aren't right, but it's not. It's not like I'm collapsing or this and that because I have a tumor in the brain, which God knows that's it's horrible, and knock on wood, but
Yeah.
but it does have some physical elements and things. And I don't know what it's done to my brain, what years of taking a chemotherapy have done to my brain. I was in the hospital. I took a very severe one, even last October. And so I think to myself, what would I be if I didn't have those things? But, overall I feel good. And, mentally I'm more, resilient than ever. And I really just try to, not think about too far into the future. I just take it one day at a time, which,
Yeah.
as you know.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So we've been going for a minute now.
Yeah.
I've loved this, by the way. This is really cool.
It's fun. It has been fun.
Do you have any last advice you have before we hop off?
Wow. Thank you for listening to this. This is
you'll have plenty more opportunities to talk about this stuff, but just for this one.
And so this is the Saving Humanity podcast. If there's something that we shared that you found of value, please reach out, share this podcast, or just hopefully it just is of value to you. So that's the purpose. And I love if you're taking the time to make this a part of your day, thank you so much. I have love for you. And until we meet again, and Nathan, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, this has been great. We'll be back.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you later.
Peace.
Peace.
Thank you. Thank you.